Hi, today we're going to talk about how to practically change the thoughts. There are some people that say, I really need to make some changes in my thinking, but how am I going to do it? I'm weak. I cannot do this. So today I want to share with you how we can have some power to change our thinking. We've been talking about how a way that we believe will determine the emotional consequence. So, as we start to identify wrong ways of thinking, we need to really analyze what is in our head. Is it worth it? So, here are a few guidelines of how to determine if it's a good thought or a bad thought. So, things like, what about the facts? Do the facts actually show me one direction or the other one? Or what are the most effective arguments I can come up to challenge what I am thinking? Or what would be the worst thing that could happen? You know, that thing that really stresses me, that thing that is even keeping me at night that I'm thinking about? Okay, run it to the extreme. What would happen if you dealt with it or don't dealt with it? What will be the end? You know, what will be the worst things that can come as a result of that? Many times we make monsters out of things that are not monsters. And we make a big scandal of something that we shouldn't. Or what if it did happen? Is it likely to be as dreadful as it appears now? Or am I going to be able to handle it? It may not be comfortable. It may not be the ideal thing. It may not be the way I thought it was going to play out. But if it really happened, am I going to be able to handle it? And in that way, you know, those thoughts that look so terrible and horrible, as we start thinking, analyzing, and seeing the true reality, we will take that edge that is poking us, that is bothering us, that doesn't let us even sleep correctly, of those wrong ways of thinking. So, what we need to do is step number one, we need to identify the wrong way of thinking, which is something that we have talked about in previous programs, how there are different ways of wrong thinking. Okay, now we identify that wrong way of thinking. But I not only need to identify that, what I need to do, the ultimate thing I need to do, I need to acknowledge the truth. Because the truth is what's going to separate that thought from a distorted thought. It's very funny. But all those things that bother us, all those things that cause us so much stress, if you really analyze it, and if you really understand the whole situation, you will see that many times those thoughts are not directed towards truth. And by being not directed at truth, that is causing me a lot of stress. So, what I need is what we call truth therapy. I know it's some very simple concept, but the reality is that is not easy. After thinking in the wrong ways, sometimes it can be challenging to do the change. Like what we tell our patients, this is not the way your brain works, but we'll be using this just for illustration. Think about this way. Suppose that in your head you have two sides. You have one negative side of your brain and you have a positive side. Again, this is not the way your brain works, but this is just for illustration purposes. And let's assume that one side, the negative side, is cloudy, it's rainy, it's muddy, it doesn't look pretty at all because it's constantly pouring down there. Well, the other side of your brain actually has the positive side and is nice and sunny. The grass is green. There's plenty of flowers and the sunlight and the temperature is just perfect there. Well, there are some people that because they have caused negative neuroplasticity in the brain, automatically everything they hear, everything they see, everything they think goes on the negative side of the brain. And because there is so much rain and there is so much mud, as they drive their thoughts on that side of the brain, the mud just accumulates in that side of the brain to the point that they actually walk like this because there's so much mud in that side of the brain. So what we tell people, think about this way. When you see the thought, and you see that it's going in a negative direction, stop it. Don't drive it to your positive side of the brain, but rather drive it to the positive side of your head. In that way, as you keep on practicing this over and over, you will stop driving your thoughts in the negative side of your head, and these will create a positive neuroplasticity to the point that you will naturally think your thoughts on the positive side of things. What other things we need to do with this truth therapy? We need to learn to analyze our thoughts. This is not something that happens naturally. It takes some effort. It takes some practice as we start catching ourselves. Man, I'm becoming so negative. I shouldn't become so negative. And you can stop those thoughts and start changing them. Also, make sure to analyze the whole thought. What is the belief behind that particular thought that you have? Is there a way I can change this? What does it mean when I'm thinking like that? Analyze the whole picture, like a sports game. You know how the people are playing there the game, and there's some commentators there explaining the play. They tell you, okay, look at that. The reason why there was a goal there is because the defense was not in the right spot, and then they throw the ball and so forth. And then you start seeing things in a way, I didn't see that the first time that the play happened. Man, this is true. It makes sense. You know, this person wasn't in the right spot and so forth. So in the same way, like a commentarist in your head that is explaining the game, in that way you need to learn to see what is really happening. And also, make sure that you challenge yourself. Think about, man, is this the way that I'm really supposed to think? And try then to replace those wrong ways of thinking with truth. Align things. Does this make sense on the light of truth? And finally, a good exercise is to write this down. See, there is something special that happens when you write things down. As you identify wrong ways of thinking, if you get in the habit of writing down, look, this was the wrong way of thinking, the way that I should have thought is this. In that way, you start making changes in your brain, and those wrong ways of thinking that maybe you have been thinking about wrong for 20, 30, 40 years, it is possible as you stop using those pathways for those pathways to disappear. And finally, not only think about truth, but practice that truth. If I realize that I have lied all the time and now I feel convicted that I shouldn't lie, it's not enough to say, okay, I'm just going to identify the lie. you need to decide that you are not going to say the lie. In that way, you change the behavior and change the thought. Remember, this is called cognitive behavioral therapy. How, by changing my thinking, I can change my behavior. And what about the truth? Where am I going to find the truth? So notice that we're not talking about just positive thinking. Many times the positive type of thinking, it's based on la la la, it's not based on reality. But when I'm basing my right way of thinking on the truth, I go beyond positive thinking. And you will notice as you start replacing those thoughts that were not truth in your head by truthful thoughts, you will see how it starts to change the way you feel. And the thing of it is that by lying to yourself, it only delays pain and it has the potential of complicating your reality and makes things worse than what it is. Sooner or later, you have to tell the truth to yourself. And just lying to you to temporarily make you feel better may work in the short term, but I can assure you in the long term, it makes things worse. So that's why, remember, A, activating event, B, belief system, C, emotional consequence. We need to change the thought, and I need to believe in that new thought. Is like a stair or a chair. I can feel the chair, or I can actually put my weight on the chair. If I really believe that is strong, in the same way, you have to believe your thought. And the fact that you have identified a distortion, that means you have actually acknowledged a problem in your thinking, and now you need to ask yourself, is it worth it? Is it good that I have this distorted thinking? And you will come to the conclusion that it is not. You need to change those ways of thinking. So, reviewing: A, activating event, B, belief system, C, emotional consequence. I want to show you something fascinating, how the Bible deals with this A, B, C. The Bible is a practical book, so let us go and see how can God help me change those wrong belief systems. Let us go to the book of Luke on the chapter 24. We pick up this verse immediately after the crucifixion of Jesus. The disciples that were supposed to be the future of all the things that Jesus came here to work for, they were a bunch of discouraged people. And as they're walking towards Emmaus, this is when we pick up the Bible verse. Luke 24, and we start in verse 13. Now behold, two of them were traveling that same day to a village called Emmaus, which was 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they talked together all these things which had happened. So it was while they conversed and reasoned that who was there? That Jesus himself drew near and went with them. What do we learn from these verses? Number one is that when I converse, when I talk, I can actually infect others of my discouragement. If I'm really discouraged, as I'm speaking, that discouragement is contagious, and I can actually discourage a bunch of people based on my conversation. Beware what you talk. That's why you analyze your thinking, you see if it's worth it. If it's not worth it, don't even say it, because you can actually infect others on that wrong belief. Another thing I learned from these verses is that when you are discouraged and when you're sad and when you're hopeless, you are not alone. It says in that difficult time of their lives, Jesus himself was walking among them. And what did Jesus do? Let's analyze the way that how Jesus dealt with this problem. first thing he does, he starts reasoning with them. Verse 16, but their eyes were restrained so that they did not know him, talking about Jesus. And Jesus said to them, what kind of conversation is this that you have with one another as you walk and are sad? Wait a minute, isn't Jesus God? Doesn't he know what people think? Why did he have to ask them? And this is the important point. See, many times you may be saying, you may be thinking things, and you don't even realize it. You know, it's just something natural that comes to you. So what Jesus wanted from them was, number one, to recognize the wrong ways of thinking. That's why he asked them, what were you talking about? So that they could recognize. And we continue, verse 18. Then the one whose name was Cleophas answered and said to him, are you the only stranger in Jerusalem, and have you not known the things which happen there in these days? And Jesus said to them, what things? So they said to him, the things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how, notice this verse 20, the chief priests and our rulers deliver him to be condemned to death and crucify him. But we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all this, today is the third day since this thing happened. Notice that we just identify the cause of the problem. So Jesus started to help him understand those wrong emotions. So remember, we said A, activating event, B, belief system, and based on the belief system is the emotional consequence that we have. Notice how this can be applied also to what we just read. A, activating event. What was the activating event? Well, it was the crucifixion of Jesus. The disciples saw it with their own eyes. It was unfair. It was corrupted. They had false witnesses, and the punishment, it was even overwhelming, crucifixion for what supposedly he was guilty of, which he was not guilty. And they saw all this, and that really, what emotional consequence they got that? They became very discouraged. They became very sad, very helpless. Why did this activating event create this negative emotional consequence? Because their belief system was wrong. See, for them, Jesus was going to become this very powerful military leader, and he was going to organize an army. And that's why, when Jesus was doing like this type of miracles of multiplying food, man, these guys were happy because they said, man, we're going to go and fight and we'll have plenty of food so our troops can be nice and strong, and we'll get the swords and fight against those people that are oppressing us. But you know what? That is not what Jesus came for. The wrong belief system added to the activating event of the crucifixion of Jesus, their whole dreams came to a crashing end, and no wonder why they felt horrible as a result of that. But please notice the solution that Jesus gave to their cognitive distortion. What we need to do, we need to add a D that we call the dispute, in order to diagnose, dispute, and deal with the wrong belief system. So their negative thoughts that they had in their head, as they expressed those thoughts with their words, it started to affect all the people around them. And the whole group got discouraged. And that's why Ezekiel says, observe and consider, but don't do likewise. So what remedy did Jesus apply to help them change the way they were feeling? He applied the remedy of spirituality. And we read about this in verse 26. He says, Jesus, ought not the Christ to have suffered these things and to enter into his glory? And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. So what did Jesus do? He says that he began at Moses. Moses is the way they call the first 5 books of the Bible. They call it First Moses, Second Moses, and so forth. So from the very beginning of the Bible to the prophets, basically, he gave them a Bible study. He showed them all these prophecies. See, the Bible is full of all these stories and examples and prophecies about what was the mission of Jesus. And in great detail, it showed what was he going to do, where was he going to live, what type of miracles he was going to do, who was going to be their parents. And by aligning their thinking to truth, something started to change inside of them. Verse 31, then their eyes were open and they knew it was Jesus, and he vanished from their sight. And they said to one another, did not our hearts burn within us while he talked with us on the road and while he opened the scripture to us? So they rose up that very hour and returned to Jerusalem, and found the 11 and those that were with them gathered together, saying, the Lord is risen indeed and has appeared to Simon. And they told about the things that had happened on the road and how he was known to them in the breaking of bread. Can you see and read between the lines how the emotions change from being a bunch of discouraged group of people? Man, now they were enthusiastic and telling everybody, the Lord is risen. They were able to change the way they were feeling by changing the way they believe. And we are not alone. If you ask God to empower your thinking, to help you identify those wrong ways of thinking, and to help you change your thoughts, I can assure you God will do that for you. But some people say, but doctor, what is truth? How do I know what truth is? Well, sometimes it can be a hard question, but sometimes the issue is that you need to calm yourself down. How can you calm yourself quickly so that you can think properly and so forth? Well, there are a few things you can do. One of them is deep breathing. You breathe in and out. This has a fascinating calming effect in your nerves. See, many times when we feel stress and we have fear and so forth, there's a part of your brain called the amygdala, and that is overactive, and that's what's giving you those feelings of stress and tension and so forth. By doing these deep breathing exercises, that tends to calm you down. And you can add an even second powerful layer, and that is prayer. As you pray in your head, and you really are honest with God, the way that you feel and how you need help, God is going to come and help you calming you down. And it's interesting, when we're stressed and anger and so forth, many times our rash decisions may actually make things worse. But when we're calm and our thinking is straight, our decisions will be actually much better. And sometimes we need help outside of ourselves to identify that truth. So what are some sources that we can do to find truth? We just saw one of them. Notice how Jesus used an external source to help them straighten up their thinking, and that was reading the Bible. As you read the Bible, that changes your thinking. And by allowing God to work and speak to you through the Holy Scriptures, that has a powerful event, not only of changing your thinking, but changing your behavior. So when you're applying this type of principles, many times the things are not natural. So especially if there is something like depression or anxiety, we need some time for this to work. Don't get discouraged. This doesn't happen from today to tomorrow. As you apply those principles, changes will start happening inside of you. And we need to deal with the preventive side of things. What if? You need to prepare yourself. That's why every day we should start our days reading the Scriptures, because it empowers us, it helps us to have our thinking straight, so that when we face the things in the day that we need to face, we'll be able to have the victory. So what can you do today to start making those changes? Well, number one thing that we need to do, we need to be honest with ourselves. When things are calm and everything is fine, write yourself a letter and identify some of the problems that you usually have when you are stressed. In that way, when you are stressed and you're thinking, that you cannot handle and so forth, get that letter and read it. And yourself, when you are calm, can actually give you some encouragement. Another powerful thing you can do is to memorize Scripture. When you learn those Bible promises and those verses with hope that say things like, I know the thoughts that I think about you, thoughts of good and not of harm. As you memorize these things, when the wrong thoughts come, you can rely on God to give you victory.